A lot of people have been asking how they should start their vegetable garden. What kind of cleanup do you do and how do you get it ready for planting? That's what I'd like to discuss in this video. And I'm going to do that by showing you what I do in my garden. Now my vegetable garden is enclosed in a fence here to keep the deer out, but outside the fence I can grow garlic. It's already about 8 inches tall and it's not even the middle of April and I'm in zone 5, so this is pretty good. What I do is I plant it in the fall around the 1st of October, and then I cover it with straw. The straw keeps the warmth in the soil in the fall. That means the bulbs have a longer period of time to set down a good root system. Sometimes they even start to grow a little above the ground, but that's okay. That won't be harmed by the frost. In spring, as soon as I can, I remove that straw, and I usually do it a bit at a time. The ice in the top part melts and I move it away, and then I wait until the sun warms the next layer and I move it away. I want to get the straw off the soil as soon as possible. The reason for that is that this is a nice insulator and it keeps the ground frozen. But I want my plants to start growing early. So I take it off so the sun hits the ground and warms the earth. That's why these plants are so tall already. Now if I leave it like this, it'll start drying out pretty soon and I'll start getting weeds. So somewhere early May, once the ground is good and warm, I'll move the straw back and cover all the soil here. Because of that, I hardly ever have to water my garlic. Now let's go have a look at my vegetable garden on the other side of the fence. This is where I grew beans last year, and you can see that they're still here. I'm not a big believer in cleaning up the garden in the fall. Right now, all of these branches are dry and brittle, and they're easy to crush up and just drop on the ground. These will compost over the summer and help feed the soil. I will pull all of this off before I plant beans, but I'm 3 to 4 weeks away from that. It's still too cold in this zone. You might notice behind me here, my tomato stakes are still there, and so are the plants. I don't even bother cleaning those up. I'll do the same thing as the beans. I'll pull the tops off, crush them up, put them on the ground. That'll be great mulch for the ground and keep the weeds down. Now you might notice that this side of the garden here has lots of soil and very little mulch. This side has a nice strip of straw. But one of the big differences here is that there are almost no weeds over here. There's one here and here, nothing in here, one over there. But this side, where there's no straw mulch, there's all kinds of weeds. There's some grass growing, a big mullum here. Here's a Canada thistle. That's why I'm a big believer in mulching with straw in my vegetable garden. It not only keeps moisture in the soil, but it pretty much eliminates my weeding. This bed over here is used for root crops, carrots and beets and radishes. Over here I grow my cucumbers. So I mulch those quite well. The plants are pretty big and I want the cucumbers to lay on the mulch. That way they tend to stay a little greener and don't get that yellow spot on them. Over here I mulch less because my rows are quite close together and there just isn't room for a lot of mulch. I also harvested late here and I just never got around to putting straw back. It would have been a good idea to cover this whole area last fall with straw. So what do I do now? I want to plant some radishes today. That's an early cold crop and the weather's good for that today. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of the weeds. I'm going to put my cucumbers back here later in the season. So for now, I'll leave the mulch there. About a week or two before I plant cucumbers, I'm going to move the mulch over to warm up that soil. Now let me show you how to weed this properly. I could pull all these weeds out by hand, but if I have a lot of weeds to do, I like using one of these. This is a Dutch hoe or a scuttle hoe. It's so much faster than the hoe that's used in North America. You just simply rake it back and forth and it cuts off the roots or pulls them out. The first hoe I ever bought was the traditional hoe, and I still have it, but I haven't used it in like 20 years. This thing is just so much more efficient. Now take your rake and just pull most of those weeds off. Now a lot of people would collect these and put them in a compost pile, but that's a lot of work. Why would you do that? I just rake them to the edge of the bed and let them compost right here. Missed one. The next step is to rake it nice and smooth. A lot of these vegetable seeds are pretty small, and you want to get a nice smooth bed to put them in. Now I'm ready for planting. A lot of people ask about preparing the soil. So should I put compost in there? Should I add some manure to it? What about fertilizer? Is this the best time to fertilize? If you're starting a new bed from scratch, it's a great time to put in that manure and compost. Dig it right into the soil. You do that the first year you prepare a bed. After that, there's no need to do that. What you do want to do is mulch with that manure and compost, but you do that once the plants are a few inches tall. Don't put that on with the seedling bed. Now, to be honest, I don't bother with any of that. I just use the soil the way it is. If your soil is really bad and you need that material, put it on throughout the year so it's slowly being worked into the soil by nature. As far as fertilizer goes, I don't fertilize these beds. Carrots and beets and radishes, they don't really need fertilizer. Now, if you've had your soil tested, you'll know exactly what to add to the soil because you'll know what nutrients are missing. If you haven't got your soil tested, you don't know what kind of fertilizer to use. Remember, you don't fertilize the plant. You replace missing nutrients in the soil. As long as you put on an inch of compost every year, you probably don't need fertilizer. It's April 14th, so it's still pretty cool here in my Zone 5 garden, but it's time to plant some radishes. So I'm going to make a row along here of radishes, and I'll just leave the rest of the bed for the beets and carrots, which will get planted in a little while. Radish seed is a pretty good sized seed. It's about medium size, much smaller than peas, which I'm going to do in a few minutes, but not nearly as small as things like carrots. So we need a row here that's about a ½ inch deep. Now let me show you the easiest way to make these rows. Now it's time to put in some radishes. Put a few in the palm of my hand. Pick some up and just go along and drop them in. And now cover them up. Make sure the soil and the seeds are making really good contact. That's all there's to it. Now we just wait. I also want to plant some peas today, and I do those almost the same way, but there is a little bit of a twist, so I'm going to show it to you. I grow only snap peas, and those are vines, and I grow them up this trellis. At this time of the year, I'll plant peas on this side, get an early crop, and then in 4 weeks I'll plant beans on the other side, and that'll be my late crop. That way the peas and beans share the same trellis and share the same soil, really. Now I've cleaned the mulch off, pulled the weeds out that were there, But with peas, because they're a little bigger, I want a bigger trough, and the rake doesn't work quite so well. For that, I like to use a trowel to get a little deeper. Now these pea seeds are very wrinkled and they're really dry. I used to soak these, but last year I did a little experiment to see if it makes a difference whether I soak them first or just plant them dry. And I made a little video to show you that. But the result of that was that it really doesn't make much difference. You might as well just sow them dry. Then we cover it up. That's a bean from last year. And if you have a little depression along that row, that's good, because then when you water, all the water runs into where the seeds are. Well, that's all there is to it, really. Now, I could water these, and I normally would, but we're going to have a big rain tomorrow, so I'm just going to leave them, let nature do the watering for me. And the other reason I'm going to do it that way is that I don't have my water hooked up yet. We still are expecting some nights with frost, and I like to wait till after the frost is gone before I hook up my hoses. Again, I'll leave the mulch off so the sun warms the soil. But then in about 3 weeks, once the plants are about 6 inches tall, I'll come and cover this with straw, and I'll push the straw right up against the plants. That's about all I do to get my beds ready in the spring. If you want to know more about growing vegetables, have a look at my vegetable playlist, and I'll put a link to that in the top right-hand corner. There's a full set of videos that'll show you everything you need to know about growing vegetables. And I have a video that shows you the 10 best vegetables for beginner gardeners. I hope you have a great meal in the garden this summer.